Since ancient times, memoirs have served to give a specific voice and a viewpoint that will echo through the ages. Neither truth nor fiction, memoir seeks to provide not the voice of a generation per se, but an idiosyncratic look at a time, a place, and a culture. Attic of Dreams is written by Marilyn Neagley. It covers the personal childhood memories of growing up in Vermont, political involvement in the environmental movements of the 70s, including helping found Shelburne Farms, and the power of nature to educate children and adults. She's also the author of the award-winning Walking Through the Seasons, which was published in 2007 and covered many of the same subjects: the environment, the landscape, and the wildlife of Vermont. Attic of Dreams is published by Rootstock Publishing. Marilyn, welcome to Across the Fence.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
This is your latest book. The last one, Walking Through the Seasons, I think I had that right, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Long time between. You had a couple other books that you wrote in between there, but they've since gone out of print. Is that right?
No, Educating from the Heart is still there.
Okay.
It's just that the publisher went out of business with my children's book called Lucy Be Goosey.
Okay. How do you write? What do you do? Do you write every day?
I write every day, mornings from about 8:30 until 11:30 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just my weekdays. I don't do it on the weekend unless I'm involved in some part of it that I really have to continue on on the weekends.
Mm-hmm. And 8:30 every day you sit down, you're at your desk, you're at your computer, whatever.
I was, as I was writing this. Right now I'm involved in setting up the book tour and and there's a lot to do with just scheduling and all of that.
Right.
Like I'm here today, so I'm not writing this moment.
That's right, that's true. we record these in the morning, Marilyn, you're giving away our secrets. Talk about the title. How did you settle on it and what does it mean, Attic of Dreams?
Well, when I was between 8 and 10 years old, I had a recurring dream about a room in our house that didn't really exist. But I would constantly ask my father to put up a ladder on the outside of the house so I could open a trap door and look into what was the attic of our house. And every time I was deeply disappointed because it didn't match the dream that I had, that this beautiful room of varnished beaded board and high ceilings and beams existed. And then about 10 years later, when I was 19, I found myself in that room. It actually appeared in my life. I was asked to take care of 3 children, and I walked into a large mansion in the area, and there was the room. And it stunned me when I saw it, but then I kind of forgot about it because I was very much involved in my new career. I was, working for an architectural office in Burlington, and everything was new and exciting, and I forgot about it and never really put together that dream had gone through my life and had become kind of a metaphor for my life. And until I was in my 40s, I reflected on it again. And then now, with the book.
In writing the book. I think they call that manifesting nowadays, Marilyn.
Oh, they do?
You manifested that room.
Oh.
You dreamed it and it appeared.
Right, okay. Well,
And it appeared.
And it really exists.
And it really exists, yes. Attic of Dreams you chose to write in different styles. We were talking about this just before we came on. Different styles depending on what age you were. Why did you choose to use this technique?
Well, it's not really different styles. It's just that it becomes a little more narrative in the middle when I'm documenting more as an adult about what happened. But I tried to speak a little more in a child's voice because I had chosen, after writing this for 6 years, in the 4th year, I decided to change to first person present tense.
Okay.
And by doing that, I had to speak in the voice of the child and then as an older person and now. Okay.
Was it challenging to do that?
Yes, it was.
It's got to be.
Because I had to change everything, all the verbs and sentence structure and everything.
Right.
But it greatly aided me in going, looking at my emotions at the time and all the sensory experiences I was having by dropping into imagining that I was there now. So that things that I had written in the first rounds were just glossed over. And then I had to just drop into, what I really felt in a moment.
Right. Tapping into that emotion. You grew up in Ascutney of Vermont. Your parents owned a well-loved restaurant that many of our viewers may remember, the Top Hat. Is that correct? What was it like to grow up in a restaurant?
Well, I didn't grow up in the restaurant, but there was a tiny bungalow next to the restaurant. My parents also had a grocery store next to that. But it was exciting as a child. Even though this restaurant brought some of the difficulties of my life in that it had a liquor supply and my mother developed alcoholism, and so did my father later in life. But I just loved the atmosphere of the restaurant because it was like an extended family for me, all of the staff and the beautiful lighting. All of my friends now that I still have from those days recall how it was like a child's wonderland to be in that building at night. Music and
hustle
food
and
hustle and bustle and bubbly lights from this rotating chandelier.
That's amazing. What is your favorite memory from that time that you recount in the book?
One of them is New Year's Eve, and a particular one when I was about nine years old, and I was asked to check the coats at the entrance, and one of my uncles helped me lift the heavy woolen coats.
Sure.
We didn't have parkas like we do now, you know, and but there was an incredible floor show that was brought in from New York City, and actually that happened every year, but this is the one I wrote about. A magician and then these fancy dancers who changed in my parents' bedroom, so I got to see them putting on their false eyelashes and netted stockings. And you can only imagine that in the 50s, a little town like Ascutney, which had 400 people, rarely saw this sort of thing.
Right.
And it was the joy of the customers that I loved when they sang Auld Lang Syne and danced their feet off. You know, they had the most wonderful time. We always had a jazz band in the club on the weekends, and we called it the club instead of the top hat. And they just danced, and then they formed a circle, and everyone kissed. Couples kissed, and then they all greeted each other with, Happy New Year. And it was something you just don't see much anymore. You don't even see dancing that much.
Right, or ever. I mean, that's a very rare moment and a wonderful memory. Did you ever consider a career in culinary arts? Did you ever think of yourself future restaurateur?
No, it's such a funny question, though. I laughed when when I think about that, because a friend of mine who was an early reader of the manuscript said that food was a main theme in this entire book, because I had a Russian grandmother who cooked, just made everything from scratch. Sausages and breads and everything was from scratch. And then here in this restaurant, and my father was really the main cook in our family. Just to be around food so much. It's not an odd question, but no, I never thought of doing that.
I didn't know about the dancing story. I thought maybe, I could have asked, did you ever think of yourself as a dancer? I mentioned at the beginning of the program how memoirs are very personal and share some unflattering details, and you share some of those details about your family. You mentioned about your mother's alcoholism. Why share a personal story? What good does it serve today?
Well, I'm already finding from my book talks that several people have come forward to me when I finish the talks and privately have said how now they want to forgive their mothers because they grew up with alcoholism too, or they themselves had become alcoholic. And we're in recovery, and part of the recovery is to make amends with the people in your life. And for me, writing a memoir, they say a lot of it is redemptive. It allows you to say thank you to the people you've loved and been close to, and also I'm sorry for anyone you might have hurt along the way. So I just think that it's already proving to me that I had said to my husband that I just hoped that I could touch one person with this story, and it's turning out that that's happening.
That's wonderful. It is sort of one of those things, generations, certainly, previous generations, my parents' generation, those things happened, nobody talked about them. And so, but it's good to talk about them as we've learned in successive generations. Did your grandparents and parents immigrate to America?
On my mother's side.
On your mother's side.
My grandfather and grandmother did. They came separately, but they found each other.
Okay.
They came through Ellis Island, and then they landed in Springfield, Vermont, just 22 miles from where I grew up.
Right.
They were very much a part of my childhood.
So is that how they end up in Vermont? They come through the Ellis Island and
then Troy, New York, and they landed in Springfield. And they Springfield, I think, was the draw because of the machine tooling industry. And my grandfather was able to do machine tooling, but they also had a dairy farm. You know, so he did both things.
Yeah, two good things to do in Vermont at that
Right.
time, early
Right.
1900s. How did you develop your love of the outdoors and your appreciation of nature when you were growing up as a child? Is that where it starts?
Yeah, I think it provided respite for me in many ways, but my father used to read to me and read things like Mother West Wind stories, and he would take me into the woods and tell me to observe. He'd say, just notice things that you've never seen before, and sure enough, I'd see something like a porcupine quill, which I'd never seen before, or you know, where pine cones had been shredded by squirrels. And normally I would have just been stuck in my head and just sort of meandering and not noticing.
Right.
And I think that really was the beginning for me.
Good advice for anyone to notice things. Just a couple minutes left, Marilyn. I didn't say we buried the lead, but I talked at the beginning of how you were the president of Shelburne Farms in the early formative years. Do you remember the first time you walked out of the property at Shelburne Farms?
Well, walking, the first time I was on the property, was I was 9 years old, and my father had taken us, my friend and myself and the parents, to see Shelburne because he grew up in Shelburne, as my great-grandparents were from Shelburne on the paternal side, and my grandfather and my father. And so he took me there, and what I remembered the most was the large breeding barn, because we stepped inside and I'd never seen anything like it. And I remembered encouraging my father, who had caddied there as a boy for Lila Vanderbilt Webb. And she used to bring hot pecan pie out to the caddies after a golf round. And I said, Dad, go to the door and say that, you know, you were a caddy here. And his reaction was, I can't do that. And I couldn't understand why. I too have walked into that barn and had a similar experience. It was like walking into a cathedral. It was just so big, and you've never seen anything like that before. Well, Marilyn, thank you very much for talking about your book and visiting with us today. Attic of Dreams by Marilyn Neagley is available now. Ask for it at your local library or bookshop, or wherever you get your books. That does it for another Across the Fence. Thanks to everyone here at WCX who makes this program possible. And as always, thank you for stopping by Across the Fence.